Hello everyone, and welcome to the next episode of The Summoning Hour with your host, Recall, myself. And today I'm joined by a former coworker of mine from ArenaNet, Rob Thody. He was a QA lead there as well, and he went through my old stomping grounds to get his feet wet testing at Microsoft.
Hello. Yes, sir.
So, I mean, that's a brief introduction. You cut your teeth at Microsoft.
Yes.
You learned how to test right out the gate from there.
Yes.
And you kind of like my path. Like after that first contract, you went straight to ArenaNet. What was that like for you?
Well, I mean, it was so interesting because I never felt like I ever had a clear and direct path with my career growth in games. And honestly, it all kind of stemmed back to your brother, Andrew. I remember, I had just graduated college. My degree was in Japan studies in Japanese. And, during college, that seemed like a great choice. But as soon as you graduate, especially in 2008, 2009,
right,
no one's hiring for those degrees. And so I had to, take a really a reflective look at myself and say, okay, what am I passionate about? What do I know? What can I offer different companies? And I remember talking to you, and I think it was at PAX I ran into you and your brother, and he was talking about games and the games industry. And I think that was my first real sort of idea, like, oh my gosh, like I have real knowledge here. I could apply myself. It's an entire industry. I live in Seattle, in a great location for games.
Right.
And so I asked if I could, meet with your brother, because I knew he was in the games industry. And he immediately just said, yeah, let's go have lunch.
Yeah, it was at Fat Burger.
No, no. That was another time. That was after Microsoft when we were talking about ArenaNet.
Oh, okay.
No, it was at, it was somewhere in the Redmond Town Center. It was like a Chopsticks or something like that. It's an Asian place.
Yeah, that sounds right. That was my brother's spot for a while.
Yeah. It's just the two of us. I mean, I think this is the first time the two of us ever let's just the two of us, come talk about games, talk about the games industry. And at that lunch, he offered me a referral to, I know this guy, he's a manager at Microsoft for testing games. I'll give him your resume, I'll give him your info, and that was it, and that was my in.
Yep.
And when I was in, and I loved it. And so yeah, I started out testing with the reserves at Microsoft on the Xbox 360. And I mean, for those who don't know, that's a major in for a lot of people in this industry.
Yep.
It's very low level, it's contract work, and it's just bare bones testing. And I loved it, and I felt good at it. I felt like I can find issues, I can find bugs, and I can help the developers and help improve this product to make it a really, really good game. So I knew at that point, like, I am all in this industry. This is great. I love it. And after about 6 months, my contract was up, and then that's when we met at Fat Burger.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And then you were trying to pitch this new company, ArenaNet. Oh my gosh, they actually have a AAA game out.
Yep.
Guild Wars. It's amazing. And I had all that MMO experience, of course, with World of Warcraft during high school and college. And so,
real quick, how much of a wowhead were you?
Oh, ridiculous. I mean, it was consuming like almost all my free time. It got to the point where my friends were either the ones who played WoW or the ones who didn't, because the ones who didn't, like, I hardly ever saw them, right?
I think everyone can identify it now with that, or even back then still.
Yeah, that game. That was just such a polarized, such a magnetizing game. I mean, just monumental.
Going back to QA real quick,
sure.
Especially at Microsoft, what was that feeling of being around other people who had the same mentality as you, of like wanting to make the game better?
Yeah.
And then what were some of the people that you saw there, and what was that like for you?
Yeah, I guess my image was, okay, I'm going to go into Microsoft, and there's going to be all these, super intellectuals. Everyone's going to be, like a programmer, or like super nerdy, glasses, this or that. But when I came in there, I was actually surprised. It was like, no, these people, they're actually just like my college like dorm mates. Like they're just like me. Like it's not like I don't know. It was so surprising to me that like I guess it wasn't as professional as I thought.
Yeah.
And to me as a new college grad, that was actually a bonus. That was like, oh, I can relax around these people.
Yep.
I remember like one of my first days, people were in a huge debate about Futurama, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is where I want to be. This is where, right? Like I enjoy this atmosphere. The people were great, and I knew that I was a culture fit, right? Yeah.
And so how did that set up your expectations when you moved from a publisher to a game developer and working firsthand on Guild Wars 2?
That was an interesting jump as well. It was certainly more professional at ArenaNet in terms of there was clear management, there was clear management structure, there were clear set expectations. I felt like I always knew where my career was headed at ArenaNet versus at Microsoft. It was just kind of a free for all.
Right.
And yeah, and I honestly, that is when I learned real management structure, was at ArenaNet.
Okay.
And I have to thank my manager. I don't know if we can name names or anything,
go ahead.
Bob Green, for teaching me like what it is to be an active listener manager, someone who will set your one-on-one schedule for you every week and never ever miss that, because that is a very important time.
Or if he did miss it, it was rescheduled immediately.
It was rescheduled immediately. Yeah, exactly. And it really opened my eyes to like, okay, now instead of just being an active participant in this industry, there's a whole new layer of management, of direction, of production. That it's this whole new beast to me, and so that kind of opened my eyes from just this. Oh, I'm a game specialist into now I'm actually part of the development.
Yeah, I had a very similar experience. Like when I joined ArenaNet, I was the 5th QA member on Guild Wars 2. And so, I was still just a tester, and there were no leads of the different areas of testing or anything like that. It was just 5 people, and we were able to test everything that was Guild Wars 2 at that point. Like, there was no Shaymore. It didn't exist. So we were able to test everything that came up, and eventually I got to be, like, they said, oh, there's enough maps to do, so
we need a specialist.
Here you go. Great. And then they're like, you can't cover this by yourself anymore. We're going to give you someone to work with. And as soon as I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Our buddy Joe Longworth, Moosey.
That's right.
He was the one who introduced me to manager tools, and I have been listening to them since.
Yes.
Every Monday, new podcast. I'll go back and listen to old ones. If I have a break in between meetings,
really great tool.
I go back to everything. Even if you're not a manager, you just want something for helping your career and your professional life.
Yeah.
Go to managertools.com.
Yes.
I think you can speak towards that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
But when I moved to ArenaNet and I got introduced to manager tools, it's like, oh my God, there's actual tactics behind this. There's strategy behind it. But the thing is, you're still mostly dealing with people, and you have to be able to listen and execute on a person-by-person basis.
Yeah.
You're never going to get bored with that.
Right.
It's not a sexy job by any means. It's not a glamorous job.
Right.
You're not going to get like IGN Professional of the Week kind of thing.
Sure.
Being a manager, but the thing is, you are growing people, like my brother and I were talking about last week. You are growing people, and you see their success, and it's like, that's huge. And how that ripples through the company, that's insane. And we saw what the opposite effect did later in our careers at ArenaNet, and how that kind of tainted a lot of that culture for us.
Right.
But anyways, you were getting into management.
Yeah, so my time at ArenaNet, I saw this transformation. I mean, I was there for about 3 years, and during that 3 years, it was pre-launch of Guild Wars 2, launch, and post-launch operations. And so my career kind of started in QA. I eventually became a lead, and then once we launched the game, I was put into this position of project coordinator. It's kind of like the head of or the organizer of a development team aimed at fixing the main issues post-launch.
Yeah, your position was very different than the other coordinators because you were addressing the live product.
Yes.
All of the bugs that were coming in from players, the live economic stuff that people were exploiting, all of that stuff. You were in charge of prioritizing that.
Especially since, the game blew up in Europe, we would have issues coming in at all hours of the day.
Yep.
And so that was actually kind of interesting because part of my job at that time was browsing Reddit, browsing the forums, going on YouTube and literally typing in Guild Wars 2 glitches and seeing if this is a legit issue and if we've caught it yet, and if not, why not? Let's fix this right now. And so that was kind of cool. That was actually a really interesting position.
And you were prioritizing what got fixed as well?
Oh, absolutely. We would have a huge backlog. And we just had this development team just focusing on churning out fixes. And so how do you prioritize that, right?
And when you say development team, who do you mean? Who was on your team?
Oh, we had programmers, we had game designers, there was a small team of QA was on the team. At one point, of course, these teams grow and shrink based on the demands, but at one point we had 2 animators on the team. It was like a full-fledged, like this group of guys, like they could almost make their own game in and of themselves, right? It was really cool.
So this team of I think it's 10 to 12 usually?
I think it grew up to 16 at its height.
At its height,
yeah.
At launch when everything's on fire and we're trying to figure this out.
Fix, oh my God, what's happening? Yeah.
But that was an isolated team of multi-discipline groups having to come together and negotiate and argue this is what's most important for the product while getting influence from the rest of the directors and Mike O'Brien doing all of the presidential stuff and saying this is what we have to do and coming in and kind of quashing your decisions and everything. All of that, while in the background, all of the other teams some of them were also multidiscipline, were making the new content coming out. And so that's doing live ops, having that rapid response group is so different than having a team that's like, oh, in 3 months we'll ship this thing.
Right.
In 6 months we'll ship these things. And that amount of fast decision making, did you have any specific tools or strategies, especially with dealing with the multidiscipline setup?
Yeah, not so much. Really, I did not get a lot of training in terms of management, and it was definitely a sink or swim situation. I was put in this position. I was the only QA member that was appointed to lead any of these teams, and I believe that the reasoning behind that was because of my expertise in, polishing the game, cleaning the game. Finding bugs is so important, especially at the launch of the game, that they wanted a representative from quality assurance to be leading this team, which makes sense. I thought that was an awesome decision, and I was very honored and humbled by it.
And at that time, a lot of places still viewed QA as just QA.
Just QA.
And our game director, Colin Johansson, did not see it that way.
Hats off to Colin for really seeing the value in QA, and I think that's something. Did he have a start in QA, or he started in design?
I don't know, actually. I will have to get him on here.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
Colin Johansson.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah. Oh, and the memes from that guy as soon as the game came out. There were Guild Wars 2 fanboys and fangirls that just loved him. Just ate him up. But really, hats off to Colin because he did see the value in QA. It was at a point where he was a huge advocate to the directors and to the CEO that we need QA representation on this team. So I'm in this position of, essentially leading this team, needing to employ change management, risk management, personnel management, and I didn't have any training. I didn't really know kind of what that was. My only training in that respect was with a small QA team, you know, prior to launch. So it was kind of an eye opener for me. It was like, wow, this is really interesting. Management of game development is something totally different that I had never really considered when I was just out of college, right?
That hit of management is just like that hit of QA of like, there's a lot more than just playing the game.
Right.
There's a lot. You have to be diligent all the time. So
yes.
Did you just play games 8 hours a day when you were in QA?
Well, see, and here's the thing. and here's kind of maybe where my path diverts from a lot of other people in the industry. I came into the industry extremely passionate about games. As I mentioned, in college, high school, putting in so many hours a day, playing various different video games. And then you get in the industry and you're at work 10 hours a day testing games. You go home and you do your hobby. You play games, right? Maybe a different game, right? But that's what you're all about. And for me, that was fine until about 3 years into it, things started to change. I felt like my passion for games was declining, and I started to feel almost like a hack in my position. And I started to think, what am I doing here? I love games, right? Like I was so conflicted. I was so confused. Like, I'm pretty sure I love games. I'm in the games industry. I'm in management. Maybe management's what I need to be doing. Maybe I need to focus more on management. And so after the game launched, I had a couple failed attempts to jump into even more of a management position, like a producer's role. I interviewed, I think, a couple times at ArenaNet and wasn't able to quite make that jump. And so I said, you know what, I need to get real management training. And that was when I decided to go back to school and get my MBA. So I did that. I did that in the evenings. So I was working at ArenaNet, studying to get my MBA, and I was thinking, you know what, I don't know when I get done with this MBA if I want to come back into games or I want to just follow management. Right. I just had a passion for management at that time, and the passion for games started to kind of decline a bit.
And that's actually a really interesting point, and something I might be able to speak to a little bit more now that I've been at another studio, is that management is actually seen as still on the job, boots on the ground. You're still doing the work of your department. And not just solely focused on management. Like when you and I got to be leads and we were managing our teams, we were out of the game. We were managing the test passes, their individual growth. We weren't boots on the ground. We had to trust our testers to be able to do the job to the quality and the extensiveness that we had trained them to do. We had to trust that.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if this is necessarily a problem just with the games industry or the fact that the games industry is still relatively young, because it's a booming business now.
It is. No, it is, absolutely.
And we're starting to look at things, but companies, I feel, need to start looking at dedicating the cost of having dedicated managers who handle the people and the processes and trust the people that they're training to do the job. Because management has been so important for retaining people, keeping them there, so you're not going through that churn of hiring people, losing other people, losing all of that historical data that they had. And if you don't have good processes, you're losing all of that. All of that documentation, all that tribal knowledge, gone. And so it's interesting to hear that you felt like management at that time wasn't in the games industry. And so that, to me, that's like a huge pain point for me, because I want that so bad, and that's why part of this podcast is dedicated to management, is because I want to raise the quality bar on management in games industry. Okay, so you were having to weigh out games industry or management, and you didn't see them.
And to be fair, that is just what I saw.
Exactly.
For me, isolated experience. It could be completely different at different.
2013.
2012, 2013.
Okay.
And so I just told myself, you know what, I really want to focus on management. I'm going to get my MBA. And when I come back, I don't know if I'm going to come back into games or not. And so I ended up switching industries altogether. And I'm actually very glad I did. I ended up going as a program manager into aerospace, completely different from video games. I'd work hard hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours a day, come home, and then I could play my hobby. I could really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And I really, really enjoyed playing games, like in the evenings. But it still wasn't as much as it was in high school and college. I feel like as an adult now, I'm almost chasing that nostalgic experience that I've had.
You're chasing your member berries.
Well, exactly. That's exactly.
You remember
right.
when World of Warcraft was exciting?
So
Do you remember?
I had such amazing times on World of Warcraft. Like, such amazing times.
They were all firsts.
Oh my gosh. I mean, downing a Valistraz in Blackwing Lair in Vanilla WoW, for me, was just the epitome of like the best gaming experience ever. And I understand why people chase that. I understand why, there was that server that popped up, that private server for WoW.
It's coming back?
And that's
Officially.
right. And, well, now Blizzard's going to put some money in behind it, and they're going to bring it back. But before, it was like a rogue server that I think some like French guys or something put up.
I don't even know.
Nostalgia
I never looked into
or
it.
something. But yeah, I mean, and people played that server, and they grinded from 0 to 60, and they did all the end game stuff, and then Blizzard came in and shut it down. And yeah, which is great and all, but it's chasing something, and it's not getting new experiences. And so, for me, and trust me, I tried to get those new experiences. I reached out to so many other different MMO games, and I just
Couldn't find it.
Couldn't find it, Yeah. So, I mean, flash forward to recently, I guess this is kind of taking it a different turn.
Yeah.
After all that at ArenaNet, and after, switching industries, my wife and I, we decided, we want to go live in a foreign country. We want to try something totally new and to go live in Japan. So we lived in Japan for 2 years, teaching English in Tokyo. It was an amazing time of our lives. And gaming did something a little different for me because of that experience. What it did was, it opened my eyes to something totally fresh and new. And that is playing games to further my Japanese.
Oh, yeah.
Because I was always a student of Japanese, like I mentioned in college, with a Japan Studies major, Japanese minor, didn't really know how to apply it. Now all of a sudden, here I am living in Tokyo, and I've got two of my passions, my old passion for gaming, which was kind of wearing down a little on me, and this passion for Japanese culture.
Yep.
Never really considered this before, because my Japanese language abilities weren't high enough to do this, but after spending 2 years in Tokyo and really focusing on my language level, I started playing video games in Japanese. Oh my god. And that just was such, I mean, if anyone out there is listening and is a fan of games, which I hope you all are, and is studying a foreign language, I highly recommend this. I mean, it's such a great tool for learning the language, and also, reinvigorating your passions. And so, I wouldn't play anything new. You just play the old Pokemon games. My buddy gave me Dragon Quest VIII.
Yeah.
He's like, hey, this is an amazing game. Play this.
Yeah.
All right. And you're reading it, and you can understand some of it, but really, the mechanics are the mechanics, right? So there's only so much you really need to know from reading the text.
Yeah.
You can pick out like, okay, I know what that kanji means. I know what that kanji means. Bread in the kitchen. That's all I know. Okay, well, I'm going to go in the kitchen and look for bread. And so that's what you do. You don't necessarily need to get the whole meaning, but gosh, it helps so much with language learning.
That's actually really interesting, because I mean, in my introduction podcast, I mentioned that I learned to read a lot of early words playing Final Fantasy I in English.
So you get that, like, you learn how to speak, like...
Fight, run. I think it was spell or magic.
Yeah.
And it's like, flee. And it's like, okay, you ran away. The party ran away. The party couldn't get away.
Right, yeah.
These are imps. This is a dragon. This is an asp. Like I remember learning all that stuff from the fight scenes in Final Fantasy 1.
All the kids are...
I'm going into like kindergarten, first grade, and I'm like, I know how to spell fight. Like,
all the other kids are like, C spot run, and you're like, see the knight run from the dragon.
Yeah, I'm like, Joe attacks. Joe does 12 damage to the asp. Yes, like,
that's great.
It was fantastic,
great.
and so
I love it.
I used it to learn English. You learned it. I used it to learn English as a kid. You used it to learn Japanese as an adult, as a communication tool, as part of your professional repertoire.
Exactly. And I think that's something that a lot of people don't even realize is available to them, especially if you're out there. You know, maybe you're a high schooler taking Japanese and it's really tough for you, or maybe you spent a couple years in France and you really want to brush up on your French. Like, there's ways you can get games in these foreign languages, and it can help.
Every single game in North America will ship in Europe, and there is the EFIGS acronym: English, French, German, Spanish, and what was the I?
Icelandic.
Italian.
Italian.
Yeah. Like, so it hits all of the primary languages in Europe.
Yeah.
And that have huge gaming populations. I mean, it doesn't hit like the Nordic countries and stuff like that, but like those have always been kind of separate anyways. But like, so if you're learning German, Spanish, Italian, French, you have a way into localization, into voice acting, into writing.
Yep.
So there you go. Whatever your sub-passion is of learning that language, you have an in.
Yep.
And that's amazing.
Absolutely. And before the Chinese WoW servers got really big, there were a lot of Chinese players. I think they must have been bypassing the Great Wall, or I don't know how they did it with
or I mean, even the Japanese players on Final Fantasy 11.
Gosh, even 11? On Final Fantasy 11. But of course, those Japanese players would mostly just speak Japanese and play with each other.
Yeah.
The Chinese WoW players, I remember there were some guys in my guild that their English wasn't that good, but they were learning. They're learning English by playing WoW. And so, that always kind of stuck with me a little bit. I was like, wow, maybe that could be something that I do to learn a foreign language. And so when I was in Japan, it's really funny. So in Japan, being a gamer really is a huge social contract that you have to sign. You have to be like, I'm dedicating my life to be a gamer. Everyone's got to know I'm a gamer. That's going to be my big thing. Or you do it in secret. And if you're a normal salaryman, or if you're a normal member of society and you are a closet gamer, it's an actual thing, and they exist. You got to kind of keep it secret.
To me, that's so interesting, because you look at like the goth movement, or like a lot of the punk movement and the pop culture in Japan. It's so out there. It's so loud.
It's so out there.
It's gaming, all the way back.
Well, for some, right? There's the group that are all in, and that's all they do is game. They only hang out with gamers, and that's their specialty.
And they're loud, and they don't care.
Right. And then there's, like I said, like I had a coworker at the high school I was teaching at. He's a Japanese teacher.
I don't want to name names.
Don't want to name names. I'll name his gamer tag Moninam. He confided in me when we were practicing Japanese together that he plays Final Fantasy 14, and he plays hardcore, like every night. And he stressed to me several times, do not tell the students. Word cannot get out that I am a gamer. He also told me, don't tell any of our coworkers. This is his secret. He did not want everyone to know that this is what he does.
Man.
And that's, to me, that's just like, as an American, it's like, why not? Just like, let everyone know, like, this is me, this is who I am.
Japanese culture, we both took Japanese together, and I took Japanese in college, so we both have this interest in Japanese culture. So it's so interesting that the social life is dedicated by your cell phone, and whose phone numbers you have. And that they were doing selfies, they were doing all this communication, emojis and everything before a lot of North Americans were. A lot of the Western world was.
Emoji is a Japanese term.
And exactly. And that their social life, at least the youth social life, and again, 10 years ago, 12 years ago when we were in high school, that was still a thing, and that was so out there, and that I bet you they had social media stuff like Instagram before we did.
Yeah.
But it just didn't take off then, or it was still isolated to the Japanese culture. But I still expected that to explode and have an impact on people our age. But here you are telling me a teacher who was roughly around our age, I'm assuming.
He was exactly our age, yeah.
Exactly our age.
Yep.
And he's still behind, like saying, no way, not going to talk about it.
Can't talk about it, yeah.
That's insane to me.
It was.
And especially now with how everything else has exploded. Like Facebook having the 2 billion people on it, or whatever the stupid number of people on it interacting daily, or Instagram and Snapchat and everything, and whatever other apps that are popular in Japan, everyone's social life is out there. And if he's playing Final Fantasy 14, he's got to be in a guild. He's got to be making relationships with people.
Yep.
How is he communicating with people and not getting that secret out?
That's interesting. You know,
like that blows my mind.
And that's Japanese society. It's just so different. It's so they have a term for it. It's called honne tatemai, and that's what you show on the external versus how you feel on the internal, right? And so what he's showing on his external is, I'm a member of society. I'm a teacher. I'm proper. You know, I come into work every day with my shirt and tie, and you know, I teach the tale of Genji to high school students and help them pass their tests and get into college.
Did Genji need more healing?
Did Genji need more? Yeah, I could ask him that, right? And so he completely hides this fact that he's a hardcore gamer. You know, and funny that we're talking about, you know, learning foreign languages through games. He practices his English by playing Fallout 4. He was telling me, he's like, yeah, I'm playing Fallout.
Nice.
And I'm so sad because, you know, I haven't played Fallout yet. But, you know, I couldn't really relate to him on that. But we did connect with Final Fantasy. And so before I left Japan, I told him, I said, write down your character name and your server, and I will see you. And he got so excited. He's like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. So, you know, of course, when I was living in Japan, I didn't have a laptop powerful enough to play Final Fantasy 14, but now I'm back here in the States, and I booted it up recently.
Did you find him?
And I created a character, and I went right on his server, and it's all, of course, it's all in Japanese, and I have yet to find him.
Son of a bitch.
No, it's, you know what it is I googled his character name and his server. He exists. It exists. It's all real. He's decked out. He's got multiple level 70s. It's ridiculous. But the system in Final Fantasy XIV for contacting a friend is they have to be online. They have to be online for you to even send a friend request. They have to be online for you to send a message. And so maybe because of the time difference, I just haven't caught him at the right time. So fingers crossed. Looking forward to finding you out there, Moninam.
And actually, that reminds me of an interesting time. When I was playing WoW, and I was starting to peter out on my passion for it, I was waiting for like the Burning Crusade to come out or whatever. I rolled my Alliance Dirty Rogue Gnome and was like fiddling around with that and just like prepping and everything. So when I was on those long ass flight paths, I would alt tab and start playing Maple Story. And it was such a unique system where you start battling with someone in that area, and then you take a friend request, and then you can start talking to them.
Yeah.
But if they're talking to a friend of theirs, you can't see their friend's text. I don't know if that's how the system still works now.
Oh, okay.
But you would see one side of the conversation. It's like, and if you didn't know that's how the chat system worked like I did, it was, who are you talking to?
Yeah, what's going on here? That's strange.
And then they're like, oh, I'm talking to this person. Let me invite why don't you guys become friends?
Yeah.
And then you're on a new conversation. and you have a new friend.
Yeah.
And then you're playing 3 people. And then you're playing 4 people. And then when you log off and you log back on, maybe some of the other people aren't on, but you already have that connection. It was guilds without guilds.
Interesting.
It was really interesting. It was almost like a grassroots guild.
Oh, I love that.
It was super interesting to
so
me.
cool.
But I don't know if they changed that system or anything like that, because I stopped playing like a long time. Like Burning Crusade came out and was just like done.
Sure. Yeah.
So, I mean, you have so many great like pieces that I want to go back to, but I can't honestly remember them. But
Yeah.
so, I mean, going forward, like you're not in the games industry.
Not in the games industry. That's right. Yeah. I actually, coming back from Japan, I got back into the aerospace industry, but it's a Japanese aerospace industry, and so I actually am able to use my Japanese on a semi-regular basis at work. But no, not with games. I got my degree in business. I got my passion for management from games. Was able to translate that over into aerospace. And I'm extremely happy now because I feel like I have my hobby back. I feel like instead of it being like part of my job, it is now part of my, oh my gosh, it's Friday night, I'm gonna hop on and play some PUBG or something. Like I get super excited about that now, as opposed to it was almost like an obligation back when I was at ArenaNet, especially when it came with even playing our own game, Guild Wars 2. Most of the whole department all had max level characters. Some of the hardcore guys went and got their ultimate weapons, which I just never quite did. I got to max level. You got your.
I did it. I have a full ascendant gear. I think I'm missing a ring.
You're way more hardcore than I am.
And I mean, that was before any of the expansions came out. I haven't played since I left ArenaNet.
Right.
But yeah.
Have you touched an MMO at all since Guild Wars 2?
Have I touched an MMO at all?
Maple Story? Don't tell me you've gone back.
No, I haven't gone back to Maple Story. They actually stopped making new stuff. I was sad about that. I'm waiting for Maple Story 2 to come out, but like that's been out in Korea for so long, but there's no North America release scheduled. So I'm just like, okay, well, I've missed that boat.
Steam keeps advertising Ragnarok to me. Are you?
No.
remember
not
those
going
days?
back to Ragnarok either. Oh my God, no. Actually, I bought into Crowfall. Yeah.
So what's that about?
So it's from one of the main designers of Shadowbane, which was an old MMO, like open world PvP, hardcore PvP MMO.
Yeah.
Had a lot of great ideas with it. Had a lot of problems with hackers and like just rule sets that never came to fruition and stuff. But this one's really interesting because it's kind of like that bite-sized gameplay, but it's kind of like a fantasy version of Eve.
Interesting.
You have your account.
How would that work?
So you are
fantasy in space?
No, it's just a fantasy game. But you actually play a spirit that inhabits different vessels, corpses.
Yeah.
And those corpses are your different classes.
Yeah.
When you're leveling up your skills, there's a whole skill branch tree that's for your account, so that will affect all of the corpses that you're in. But then there's a separate tree for those specific classes or the specific skills that you want to level up, like armor smithing or hunting and gathering or leadership and stuff like that. So, and all those just grow with time. So you set the skills and they start ticking and you start getting benefits like that. So much
Very
like
cool.
the skill progression in Eve.
Yeah.
But this is entirely a PvP MMO. And so there's different worlds that you can join into that have different durations and objectives. So one might be like a PUBG style last man standing or last squad standing.
Yeah.
And you have the zone closing in on you.
Really?
Yeah. But it's fantasy. So you have your archers, you have your rangers, you have your casters, your healers, all that kind of stuff. And it's the same perspective as like Guild Wars 2, but it's more it's more Smite-ish in controls.
Ew, you're selling me on this.
I like it. I really like it. I need to get more into it.
Yeah.
I need to make that a priority to dive into it. But I love that it's from a hardcore group of game developers. It's all grassroots. They kickstarted their game. They're still taking donations and everything, and they have done a fantastic job at communicating to players who are investing in this. This is what we're doing every single month. This is how we're falling behind. This is how we're ahead of schedule. This is where we're changing our priorities.
So important.
And these are guys who've just raised money. and they've been open and honest about every step of the way, and they've listened to the community about some of the problems that the community had with how they were structuring things. Originally, it was just if you, like, a class was tied to a race. So if you were a Minotaur, you were going to be a Myrmidon, which was a specific class. They've split that.
Okay.
Some classes at launch will still be restricted to a specific race, but they have plans to extending that class to other races. But they're still keeping everything within scope. They want to say, this is what we want to do for launch. And so, aside from the different modes, the crafting system, and if you're a hardcore Star Wars Galaxy fanboy,
how's the crafting?
it is like Star Wars Galaxies. You gather all the stuff, you craft it, and you can customize what you craft to help emphasize different stats on it. And there's a chance of failure.
And that will destroy the weapon? Or the item?
You won't get as much of so when you craft a weapon, there's a chance of failure where you don't craft a weapon. But when there's the chance...
But it doesn't break it.
But it doesn't
Not
break
like Ragnarok.
But when you craft the weapon, you get to say, I want to upgrade these points. And you might have critical success, you might have success, or it might not do anything.
Yeah.
I can't recall if there's a fail. I can't recall. But so everything that you do, everything that you craft is become personalized by you. Then you can save that as a blueprint. And so then you can craft that exact weapon, and then it's just a craft or fail or success. But depending on your crafting skill, you get more points to add to the customization, or you get to reduce your chance of failure. So if you like Star Wars Galaxy crafting, this is the next MMO for you.
And is this something where you can craft weapons, you can craft
armor, potions, accessories, corpses, vessels? You can go into grave digging and find different, and the crafters are like stitching those body parts together basically, and you will be able to make like a common vessel, a unique vessel, a legendary vessel of different qualities.
Master Dr. Frankenstein there.
Yeah, and your skill in those crafting skills actually influence how good you can actually make things.
Wow, okay, right on.
But the thing is, if you want to be a crafter, you dedicate yourself to being a crafter. You are not going to be able to fight as well as everyone else. But this is a long haul game. The more time that you put into it, or making sure that your skills are set, the more you're going to elevate in those skills. So the crafters are going to have to rely on the gatherers.
Right.
The gatherers are going to have to rely on the fighters to get to the objectives. Because there's still going to be like world versus world basically from Guild Wars 2.
From Guild Wars 2.
There's basically that. There's basically last man standing PUBG style. There is going to be other story sets and objective sets. Attack, defend kind of thing.
That sounds phenomenal. That sounds excellent.
Right? And each one of these things have different durations and different rule sets. So like the hardcore world versus world, if you die, someone can loot everything that's on you. If you find a unique like gathering spot and your guild takes it over, you want to get your pack animal there, escort them there, have all of your miners mining the shit out of that while your escort guards are protecting you. And then escort that pack animal back. And the player has to drive that pack animal.
Oh, wow.
And so you have to get that back to your export location, and you're only able to export so much. Otherwise, everything has to be used there. There's rule sets where you start with nothing. You cannot import anything into that match. So you just go in with your vessel, and maybe even backup vessels. But if you're in a hardcore rule set and you bring a backup vessel, you are willing to sacrifice that vessel if you die, because then someone can loot it off of you.
Diablo 2 style.
Yeah.
Oh,
hardcore.
Gives me shivers.
So, because there's that variety in rule sets, you can take your PvP flavor, hardcore PUBG style, one and done, sacrifice a whole lot, risk reward.
Yep.
They're doing a lot to balance that. And they're doing a lot to create a lore and a world behind it. So you're the spirit raven or spirit crow that inhabits these different vessels. And so they've even tied that into the lore and how that all works. It's fantastic. They're doing a bang up job selling it. And so you can still buy into it and get
Once again, what's the title of this? Crowfall.
So
take a look at it.
Yeah. So that's interesting to me right now. Are there any games that are interesting to you right now?
Oh gosh, you know, I get so focused on my just like 2 or 3 games You know, in the past like 3 months, I've just been juggling PUBG, Heroes of the Storm, and Final Fantasy 14. I haven't really been like expanding or looking at outside of that.
Yeah. You're a filthy casual.
I'm a filthy casual, you know, and that's exactly right. And there's nothing wrong with that. I also have been playing Final Fantasy X in Japanese to work on just you know, improving my Japanese skills. Staying fresh. I've got on the DS one of the latest Pokemon games.
Nice. Is that in Japanese too?
That is in Japanese.
Nice.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm just not really doing much else, you know, outside of that. Super open to recommendations though, and that's one of the things. Like, I love how I've sort of created my group of friends around this industry, in that, you know, I'll always be up to date on, like, you know, the latest technology, the latest games, the latest, you know, hotness is like, you know, is what everyone's talking about. So just hearing like your recommendation and you know, you're just kind of nerdgasm there on Crowfall was awesome and exciting. And I know the first thing I'm going to do when I go back home today is going to check that place out, or check that game out. So
real props to J. Todd Coleman on Twitter. That's his handle. He's been super open from the beginning. He launched a great Kickstarter process with his co-founders, and just love the ambition coming from like Wizard 101 and Pirates 101, how much he's taken that information, especially from Shadowbane. And even though Shadowbane was like a late 90s, early 2000s kind of movement, he's taken that passion and 18 years later applying it to a new game that has an opportunity to take off because of the way MMOs have changed. And so huge props to him.
Very cool. Very cool.
So that's where you're at with games. The other aspect of the podcast is talking esports. Now, because you're not playing games as much, do you find yourself watching more esports or being more into esports as a spectator, or
a bit? For me, esports is very much a social thing. So, you know, of course, like when I was kind of isolated in Japan, I would watch Twitch. My wife and I got really into Hearthstone. She was playing every day, and so we would, of course, you know, start watching. We became a big fan of Trump and learning his, you know, Hearthstone tactics, and just watching him just own people, which is awesome. But then when it comes to like the big events, it's such a social thing for me. I can remember my first kind of getting into esports was with my buddy Timon when I was living in his house. We would stay up late and watch Korean StarCraft streams. And these major tournaments, and then we would just kind of become like little fanboys, you know, over these like, you know, 18-year-old Korean kids. We're like, yeah, go Bisu. And it's just, you know, it was so fascinating because then, you know, it was just the two of us. Then all of a sudden, like, we introduced it to another friend, and he starts becoming a regular, and all of a sudden, this is a social thing. We're sitting around the couch. We're not watching movies, you know, we're not watching TV. We're watching some Korean kids halfway around the world play a video game. Like, what is going on here? There's a major shift in entertainment, and if this actually takes off, then it's going to be huge. And of course, that was like, you know, 8 years ago, and we've seen the growth and development of esports since then.
And Twitch as a platform.
And Twitch has helped a lot.
What was it bought for like 90 million from Amazon?
Amazon bought it for a ridiculously stupid amount. They left the branding Twitch. I'm very glad they did.
I still think they stole it.
They stole it?
I think they got away with an incredibly low price on Twitch. Considering now Blizzard is paying for a 2-year exclusive deal for the Overwatch, or Twitch is paying exclusive rights to broadcast in Overwatch League. Overwatch League being like the biggest thing since League of Legends, basically, as an esport and as a franchising esport. Holy crap! Like that's insane. So, anyway, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. So with esports, it's one of those things where I probably won't sit down at my computer and watch a tournament alone and just that be it. However, if you know, someone in my social circle, yourself included, is ever just like, hey, there's this tournament on, come on over, let's watch it. Like we were just talking about PUBG tournament. Let's do it. Like, I want to see that. That's awesome.
You know what? I don't know what time it starts today, but if you would like, you and your wife are welcome to come over for dinner. And if it's already played out, we can watch the VOD.
Yeah.
If it's still going, we can watch it live.
Yeah.
So that invite is out there.
Thank you, sir. Yeah.
So, and next weekend is the Western Clash in Heroes of the Storm. So we could watch that. So that's Europe, Europe and North America, and I think Latin America. I don't know if Latin America, they have a different rule set for that. They might be involved. I hope they're involved because that community needs some love.
I am a huge supporter of Latin America esports gamers because they're such the underdog, you know, and it's like, yeah, join the club, like, absolutely. Let's have some awesome NA, EU, you know, and then Latin America fights going on. Like, that's
even
awesome.
South America. I love how the Brazilian CS teams have come out and just shown up. They've won some major tournaments now. I love that I believe it was a Brazilian Street Fighter player came out and won the last big event, and he took down a huge opponent from Echo Fox. Wow. I'm still new to following fighting games, so I don't remember all the names, but like that's super cool to me. And like you said, the underdogs, they don't have the gaming pools that North America, Europe, and even like Russia and China or Japan have, depending on the game. But like South America and Brazil and Latin America, I want to see them succeed. Or even Australia. They are so isolated with their internet speeds and everything, and the pools of people who play out there. I want to see them succeed. So every time there's a major tournament, if they're not playing a North American team, I'm like, go Australia, go Brazil, go Latin America. And I want to see them succeed so hard, and those teams are going to blow up because things like the phone and online gaming is relatively cheap to go in. And as we see a shift to mobile, I mean, the biggest news to me about mobile gaming is that Vainglory, a successful MOBA experience on the phone, has shifted to 5v5 from 3v3.
On the phone?
On the phone, on the tablet. It's super accessible now.
Wow.
And it was popular as a 3v3. It had huge criticisms as not being a real MOBA because it wasn't 5v5, because that was the standard set by Dota, by League of Legends, and they just made that move. And this summer, they're moving their entire esports focus to 5v5.
Wow, well, best of luck to them.
Yeah,
that sounds
so
very exciting.
I'm excited to watch that and see how that grows and support that. So if you're a team that needs a little administrative help, reach out to me. Let me see what I can do. I'm happy to handle some of that background stuff. And I think with that, Rob, why don't you sell us on any social media stuff that you have going on, or anything that you want to mention? You sat through an hour of this conversation.
Yeah. You know, this is non-gaming related, but you know, you heard us talk a little bit about Japan. When my wife and I were actually living in Japan, we kept a pretty active blog with pictures and stories. And so if you're interested in living abroad, thinking about possibly living, you know, anywhere in Asia, check out my blog. It is tokyotusum.tumblr.com. That's tokyotusum.tumblr.com. Really great info there. But yeah, that's about it for me. Thank you so much for inviting me. This is awesome.
You. I hope we can do this again.
Yeah, sure.
I want to start doing like 3 and 4 people.
Oh yeah, that'd be great.
I think I want to talk specific games with that, so that we can just dive
deep into it. Yep.
Tear it apart.
Oh, absolutely.
Break it down. Call out what we see as flaws. What's interesting about it.
I'm all about that.
Awesome. So that maybe not. We'll have to come up with a different name for that. Maybe the Summoning Circle.
Yeah.
I think I just branded that. There we go. So it'll be the Summoning Circle within the Summoning Hour.
There you go.
I'm going way too far with this. Anyways, hopefully everyone got some value out of this.
Hope so.
Please hit me up with any management questions, QA questions, production questions. And if I don't know the answer, I know enough people in the industry in different disciplines that we can find out an answer. And if you have any questions for Rob, I'm happy to hit him up and get back to you with his response. So thanks for listening, and hopefully we'll see you next time.
See ya.